Expressions are a great addition to Silhouette. I'm Ben Brownlee for Boris Effects, and I'm going to show you how we can use expressions to auto-animate parameters and also do something a little bit different with them. We're going to start in Silhouette with a simple radial gradient, because what I'm really interested in is how we can begin to auto-animate our position. Now, I'm choosing position for a couple of reasons actually, but one of those big ones is just how we can start to work with two-dimensional properties, because all of the things we're going to see are going to work on one-dimensional properties like aspect. You know, it's only got one value in there, but I also think it's important to see how things can work across multiple values as well. So the first thing we're going to do is just turn on expressions for a value. And I'll come down and I'll just turn on the expression there. And now we can start to type something in. Now, if we're just working with just a one simple parameter like aspect or something, we could just type in any number. But because this is a position value or position parameter, we have a special type of property called a point, and it's actually point 3D. And if we type in point 3D here, Silhouette is going to know that the value that we're going to be taking out is a point in 3D. And even though it says point 3D, it actually defaults to a two-dimensional value. So inside these brackets, if I just wanted it to stay in the middle, I could just go 1920 by 1080, because we have an Ultra HD session size. Let's check out our session size here. Yeah, Ultra HD. So 1920 by 1080 is the center point of our session. So point 3D, 1920, 1080. Lovely. Because it's set by expressions, we can't actually do anything with it, but that's how we can set up a position point. If we wanted this to animate instead, or auto-animate, we would have to choose a value that changes over time. And there are a couple of different ones that we can use straight off the bat. One of them is time. The other one is frame. So time counts in seconds and frame counts in frames. So if I just, let's type in frame here and let's hit enter on the number pad, and let's just play this through. So now we can see that it's slowly ticking up from 0, which is over on the left hand side, and if we gave it enough time, it would eventually get over to the right hand side. We don't have that time to spare. So what we can do instead, if we want this to move faster, we can start to modify this frame, and we can, or the value from the frame. So usually this is going to be some sort of multiplication. So I'm going to take multiplied by 10. Now if we play this through, it's basically going to move 10 times faster as it did previously. So when we're at frame 167, our position is going to be 1660, because of course we started on frame 1, which is actually 0, frame 0 as it counts it. There we go. So it's just moving from left to right. All very well and good. Lovely. Okay. But sometimes we don't want things to move in a linear direction or in a linear manner. So we can start to use some of the Python math that we have built directly into the expressions. Now, we don't have everything, but we do have some interesting ones like sin for sine and cosine. And let's take a break now, and we'll just have a look at what these things are doing. And it's probably easier to see it on an actual graph. Okay, so here I am in my graphing calculator, and let's just run the equivalent of what we were doing before, which was going to be x, which is going to be time. So we've got, let's have a little look here. So basically this is going to be our frame number going up, boom, And if we come in here, we do x multiplied by 10, which is what we did there. It's the same thing, a linear movement, but it's just going up a lot steeper. Let's add another one in here now, and I'm going to use sine. So that's just going to be sin, open brackets, and we'll use x again because that's going to be our frame number as well. That's the equivalent there. And now we can see this lovely little sine wave. Let's just drag this down here. And you can see the sine wave moving up and moving down and moving up and moving down. So this is moving from 0 up to 1, down to -1, and up to 1 again. So that's what that's doing. Let's take a quick look at how that looks in Silhouette. So we're only interested in the first bit before the comma because that's our x. And I'm just going to go sine or sin and then put our frame in parentheses. And let's take a little look. Now we're going to have to be very, very observant here because this is just moving back and forth between 1 and -1. So let's move this into position here, just so it's in the center of the frame. So I can still have it doing the position there, but let's just move everything forward. So I'm going to go plus, and remember we're in Ultra HD, so in the middle of the frame is going to be 1920. So now I've got my point 3D, x is sine, open parentheses frame, close parentheses plus 1920. So that's x, and the y is just 1080. So let's hit play. And now you can see that just running around, just doing, very, very small movements. So how do we make those swings bigger? Let's go back to our graph again. So I'm going to go sine x, and then I'm going to multiply this by, we'll multiply this by 15. And let's zoom out a little bit. So now we've got that same sine wave curve going up and down between 0 up to 15 and down to -15. And it's still plotting out with the same frequency. We've just changed the amplitude. So popping back into Silhouette, let's do that. Let's change the amplitude. So go sine frame times, let's do times 15. We've still got the plus in the end, but that's fine. So that's moving a little bit bigger, or moving a little bit more. We've changed the amplitude of how much that sine wave is moving our position now. And we can take this even higher. Let's take this to 100. And that's wiggling around quite nicely. Okay, let's stop that, because that's moving quite fast. So we've changed the amplitude. How do we now come in and change the frequency? Well, let's have a look on our graph again. Let's turn off a couple of these. There we go. So if we want to change the frequency, we're going to do that in between these brackets here. So sine x, we can either divide, or I can just multiply by a number that's smaller than 1, and I'll do exactly that. Let's do x times by 0.2, and let's just multiply that by 15 again, so we get the same sort of curve. So now we've got the same amplitude. It's going up and it's going down to 15, -15. But in here, we've changed the frequency of what things are doing. Let's take that into the context of Silhouette. So sine, open parentheses, frame, multiplied by 0.15, close parentheses. And now that's moving a lot slower. That's waving a lot sort of slower. So now we have our sine wave happily moving things back and forth. What we can do is we can also add in a little bit more randomness to this. It's not really random, of course, but it's going to look a little bit less sort of mechanical and uniform. And let's come back into our graph. So we can start to chain multiple sine waves together and make small adjustments and get something out that looks a little bit different. So I'm going to copy this one and I'm going to paste it in here. And then I'm going to I'm going to paste another version of this in. So let's just zoom out on here. So at the moment, all this is done because our frequency is the same. All this is done is giving us slightly bigger waves that are going up and down. Let's change the frequency on the second part. So let's make this more frequent. I'm going to double the frequency, so 0.4, and let's halve the amplitude on this, or yeah, so I'm going to go 7.5. So now we've got a slightly more interesting wave because we've got multiple sine waves collapsing on each other. So if I take this even further and maybe take this to 0.6 or 0.55, you can start to see how we can get more irregular values going along and through that. So let's not stop there. Let's come in and I'm going to do one more here. Actually, let's copy all of this. Let's paste it into a new one. And I'm going to take that last bit here, copy that and paste it in over itself again. And let's make another sort of small change here. So let's make this even smaller, the amplitude on the third one even smaller, but let's make the frequency even more and something a little bit irregular. So let's do 987 or something. No, maybe that's... And if I turn off the other sine waves here, we can see we've got something that's a little bit more kind of wibbly wobbly. And let's expand that idea out into Silhouette. So let's take this in. I'm just going to take the relevant part, which is the sine wave part here. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go plus, and I'm going to go paste, and I'm going to go plus, and I'm going to go paste. And let's change up the stuff that's happening in between. So let's make the second one more frequent. So we'll change the stuff that's inside the sine parentheses. There we go, just sort of random numbers in there. And let's take the amplitude down as it gets more and more frequent. So let's do plus 50, or sorry, multiplied by 50 on the second one and multiplied by 35 on the third one. And let's have a little look at what that's doing. So it's sort of wiggling things around a little bit, kind of shaking stuff around. Now this could be fairly handy. You just want to shake a value around. But with something like position, you might also want to be able to kind of keyframe and animate this a little bit manually as well. So how would we do that? Because once we've applied something as an expression, or once we put an expression on a value, we can't add extra keyframes on top of that. The value itself is going to be taken from our expression. Well, here's what we can do. We can basically tie in any other value, any other parameter even from a different node, and make that our offset. So at the moment we've got a fixed offset, which is the 1920, which is what we did quite close to the beginning. But maybe we can have that, instead of being plus 1920, maybe we can have that as you know, any other value that we've got, any other parameter that we can put down there and keyframe. So I'm going to add a transform in here. I'm going to add a transform in because there are certain values that max out, or certain parameters that max out. So rotate, for example, maxes out at minus 360 or plus 360. So that wouldn't be an ideal parameter to link things to. But we've got a position. Why not link things to another position? They're going to be, you know, relatively the same. And if I hover over the top, we can see that this is position X. Save that for later. I'm just going to push this over here somewhere. So basically so that we can come in and see what the drop down menu looks like. Just because of the way I've got my Windows set up here. So I can click on the little 3 dots over on the side, and I can copy the expression reference. This is going to be really handy. So if we come back into our radial gradient and come over to this plus 1920, which has been our fixed offset. So instead of having that, let's delete that. We get the warning triangle saying that we don't have a valid expression yet. And let's paste in that value. So plus transform 1, which is the name of our node, dot position, which is the name of the parameter. But, oh, we've still got a warning sign. And that's because position actually has an X and a Y. We know that because that's what we've been dealing with before. So let's just use the X value, X parameter. So I'm going to do dot X. And all of a sudden, that lovely little triangle disappears again. I can hit enter in here. Let's preview our radial gradient one more time. Let's play that back. So it's shaking as it did before, but what happens now if we keyframe in our transform that things are tied to? Let's come over here. Let's take this all the way over. Let's just take a look at our radial gradient. Yeah, because we're taking that value there. That value is now being keyframed. So as we play this back, it's going to take our sine wave, doing the little wiggle, and also add it to the position, which is going to give us our offset. So we've now got a controllable parameter with a nice bit of wiggle on it. And we're only working on the X because the Y is still tied to a fixed 1080. And we can expand that same sort of idea to other parameters as well. So if we come into our next node, which is just a color here, we can do the same sort of thing with color nodes as well, or color swatches as well. So let's take a little look at that. Let's click on the mini hamburger. It's more sort of French toast icon. I don't know, the equal sign to enable the expression there. And we need to now define that this is going to be a color, and colors have RGB and A. So I'm going to call this one color, open brackets, RGB A. Move that out of the way. And these values go from 0 to 1. So 1, 1, 1, 1 should give me a solid white color, and it does. And we have this set to 1, 0, 0. This will be a solid red color. So let's define our red in terms of that sine wave. So I'm going to go sin, open brackets. We'll do frame again because that's always a good way of doing things. And now remember, the stuff within this determines our frequency. So let's multiply this by 0.15 and close our parentheses. Let's play this back. Okay. So why is it spending a lot of the time black? Well, let's return to our original sine wave here. It's spending a lot of the time black because half of the time red is underneath 0. And when we're defining a color with a color swatch, our minimum is 0 because that's no color in that channel at all. So all that's time it spends at minus, whatever, is time that it's under 0, so it's not going to be contributing to the colour. So we could lift everything up. So do +1 and lift everything up. But then what's going to happen then is it's then going to spend half its time above the maximum value of 1, which is, not great. What we're going to do instead is we're going to add in another function, and this is the abs function, ABS, absolute. Let's just type in, let's add in our sine wave here so we can see that. So what abs does is whenever a value is meant to go below 0, it's, into negative territory, it's actually going to always return a positive number. So we don't have to do any clever maths, we just have to use the abs function, and if our value is greater than 0, it returns that value. If it's under 0, it's going to multiply that value by -1, so we always get a positive number, no negatives. So go boom, 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 boom. It's going to be quite nice. So abs for absolute. So let's do that again. So let's bring in abs at the start, open parentheses. And of course we open the parentheses. We also need to close them again at the end and wrap everything else up nicely. This is going to jump everything down at double the speed because we're, or double the speed we're used to, because of course we're not spending any time under 0 anymore. So we might want to just drop this down. Nice. And let's just copy that whole thing from the abs to the closing parentheses, and then paste that into the green. I'll change up the frequency there and paste it into the blue as well, and again we'll change up the frequency. Maybe, what do we do this one, 0.38 or something, 0.38 I should say. And now we have a nice color cycle happening across our color swatch. And that's all because of the auto-animating happening not just with frame but also using the sine wave to help us as well. So in this exercise we've done a few things. The first one, of course, is learning how we can start to define points if we're going to use them for expressions, and we've also seen how we can begin to auto-animate those particular values, first using time via frame, and then also expanding on that by offsetting or multiplying to make that move faster. We also took a look at how we used a couple of basic math functions, including sine and absolute, to get values that we would cycle through in a nice consistent way, and then chaining different sine waves together to start to sort of break up that very, very regular sort of pattern. And also how we could tie that in to manual animation by adding in an offset that was also keyframeable. Now, there are lots of other things that we can do with expressions, and I'd like to hear from you about what sort of things we should be focusing on. Should we dive deeper into certain sorts of functions, or would you like some other tips about how we can create up custom parameters and things? So please let us know in the comments, or join our Discord server to be part of the bigger Silhouette community. My name is Ben Brownlee for Boris Effects, and I'll see you again soon.